Good people don't exist. Only controlled impulses do. This is the first truth most people are never allowed to confront. From childhood, we are taught a comforting lie, that human beings are divided neatly into the good and the bad, the kind and the cruel, the moral and the immoral. Society teaches us that goodness is an identity, something you are, rather than something you manage. But this illusion exists for one reason. It keeps people predictable, controllable, and blind to reality. Because once you believe you are purely good, you stop watching yourself. And that is where danger begins. Society does not teach you to deny your dark side because it wants you to be virtuous. It teaches you to deny it because denial makes social order easier to maintain. A population that believes it is naturally good does not question its impulses, does not examine its motivations, and does not prepare for the darker instincts in others. When people believe evil is rare, external, and obvious, they become naive. And naivete is not innocence. It is vulnerability disguised as morality. The danger of believing people are purely good is not philosophical. It is practical. When you assume goodness, you stop recognizing manipulation. When you assume kindness, you misinterpret intent. When you assume moral purity, you ignore power dynamics. This is why some of the most exploited people in the world are those who pride themselves on being good. They trust too easily. They explain too much. They forgive too quickly. They believe others operate from the same moral framework they imagine themselves to have. And predators sense this immediately. Denial makes you manipulable because it disconnects you from reality. When you refuse to acknowledge that human beings are driven by envy, status, dominance, fear, resentment, and desire, you become blind to the forces actually shaping behavior. You start judging people by their words instead of their actions. You believe apologies without watching patterns. You confuse politeness with character. You mistake emotional displays for sincerity. And in doing so, you hand psychological leverage to anyone who understands human nature better than you do. This is where identity activation begins, not with empowerment, but with honesty. The moment you stop asking, "Am I a good person?" and start asking, "Do I understand my impulses?" something changes. You shift from moral fantasy into psychological awareness. You stop clinging to the image of innocence and begin cultivating something far more powerful: self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is the foundation of real control. Here is the first truth that shatters the illusion. Truth 1. Everyone has destructive impulses. Aggression, envy, jealousy, dominance, selfishness, cruelty. These are not abnormalities. They are human defaults. They exist in every person, regardless of education, culture, religion, or social status. What differs is not whether these impulses exist, but whether they are recognized, managed, or denied. The most dangerous individuals are not those who admit to darkness. They are those who insist they have none. Because what is denied does not disappear. It leaks, it distorts, it erupts under pressure. People who believe they are purely good often express their darkness indirectly, through passive aggression, through moral superiority, through quiet sabotage, through emotional manipulation disguised as concern, through righteous cruelty justified as doing the right thing. History is filled with atrocities committed not by those who embraced evil openly, but by those who believed they were morally justified, chosen, or righteous. Darkness does not require awareness to operate. In fact, it thrives in blindness. This leads to the second truth, one that most moral systems avoid, because it threatens the illusion of purity. Truth 2. Morality is self-control, not innocence. Morality is not the absence of dark impulses. It is the regulation of them. A person who lacks aggressive instincts is not moral. They are simply limited. A person who feels no selfish desire is not virtuous. They are incomplete. True morality emerges when a person can harm, can dominate, can exploit, but chooses restraint consciously. Strength precedes ethics. Without strength, morality is just compliance. This is why the most stable, grounded individuals are often those who understand their capacity for destruction and refuse to be ruled by it. They are calm, not because they are harmless, but because they are integrated. They do not panic under pressure. They do not lash out emotionally. They do not collapse when tempted. Their self-control is not fragile because it is built on awareness, not denial. Once you understand this, your perception of people changes permanently. You stop trusting appearances. You stop assuming intent. You stop projecting your own moral self-image onto others. You begin watching behavior, patterns, emotional reactions, and power responses. And this awareness does not make you cynical. It makes you precise. The lie we are taught about human nature is comforting, but comfort is expensive. It costs awareness. It costs protection. It costs agency. The truth is uncomfortable, but it gives you something far more valuable: clarity. And clarity is the beginning of mastery. Carl Jung introduced a concept that unsettles people, not because it is complex, but because it is accurate. He called it the shadow, the part of the psyche that contains everything we refuse to admit about ourselves: our aggression, our selfishness, our desire for control, our resentment, our capacity for cruelty. The shadow is not evil by default. It is simply unacknowledged, and what is unacknowledged does not remain passive. It operates unconsciously, shaping behavior in ways the conscious mind cannot explain. Jung warned that the more a person denies their shadow, the stronger it becomes. Suppressed darkness does not disappear. It leaks. It slips into tone. It hides inside moral language. It disguises itself as concern, righteousness, humor, or principle. People who believe they are above dark impulses are often the most controlled by them, because they have no conscious relationship with their own capacity for harm. They don't see it coming when it emerges, and neither does anyone else. This is why suppressed darkness is far more dangerous than acknowledged darkness. When someone understands their darker impulses, they can regulate them. When they deny them, those impulses act without supervision. The person becomes unpredictable, emotionally volatile, and morally inconsistent, convinced of their goodness, while unconsciously acting out hostility. This is not a character flaw. It is a psychological pattern. The shadow always reveals itself, especially under stress. Pressure does not create darkness. It exposes it. When people are frustrated, challenged, rejected, or threatened, their shadow slips through the cracks of their self-image. And this is where the signs become visible. Sign 1. Passive aggression comes from denied darkness. Passive aggression is not weakness. It is repressed hostility. It emerges when someone feels anger, envy, or resentment, but cannot consciously admit it to themselves. So instead of direct expression, the emotion takes indirect routes. Sarcasm, backhanded compliments, intentional forgetfulness, subtle sabotage, emotional withdrawal, or moral judgment disguised as advice. The person believes they are being reasonable, even kind, while unconsciously punishing others for emotions they refuse to acknowledge. This is why passive-aggressive individuals often insist they are nice people. They equate niceness with goodness, unaware that niceness is often just fear of confrontation, combined with suppressed anger. Jung understood this clearly. The more someone clings to a spotless moral identity, the more pressure builds in the shadow. And pressure always looks for release. The danger here is subtle. Passive aggression corrodes trust slowly. It destabilizes relationships without open conflict. It creates confusion instead of resolution. And because it is indirect, it allows the person expressing it to maintain the illusion of innocence. They never have to face their own hostility, and so it grows. This leads directly to the second sign. Sign 2. Moral superiority is often hidden. Hostility. When someone constantly frames themselves as morally superior, deeply principled, or ethically enlightened, it is often not virtue you are witnessing, but unprocessed aggression. Moral superiority provides a socially acceptable outlet for judgment, condemnation, and control. It allows a person to express hostility without feeling guilty, because the hostility is justified. This is why moral language is one of the most effective disguises for darkness. Judgment feels righteous, condemnation feels virtuous, punishment feels deserved, and the person delivering it feels morally elevated rather than emotionally aggressive. Jung saw this as one of the most common shadow mechanisms, the projection of one's own denied darkness onto others, followed by moral attack. History is filled with cruelty carried out in the name of goodness. On a personal level, relationships are often destroyed, not by openly hostile people, but by those who believe they are doing the right thing, while quietly expressing resentment, envy, or the desire to dominate. The shadow doesn't need violence to be destructive. It only needs denial. This is why nice people are often the most dangerous. Not because kindness is bad, but because forced niceness often conceals rage. When a person has built their entire identity around being good, kind, or moral, they have nowhere to place their darker emotions. So those emotions go underground. They come out sideways. They strike when the person feels justified, threatened, or morally superior. The truly dangerous individual is not the one who admits they are capable of harm. It is the one who insists they are incapable of it, because they never see themselves coming. This is the psychological cost of shadow denial. It creates blind spots. It creates hypocrisy. It creates emotional explosions that feel out of character. And it makes people manipulable, because anything denied internally can be activated externally. Guilt works best on those who deny selfishness. Moral pressure works best on those who deny aggression. Emotional manipulation works best on those who deny resentment. Integration is the only solution. Not indulgence, not suppression. Integration means recognizing your shadow, naming it, and placing it under conscious control. Jung believed that wholeness, not goodness, was the goal of psychological health. And wholeness requires the courage to see yourself honestly. Before moving forward, internalize this affirmation, not as comfort, but as grounding. I acknowledge my shadow. I do not deny my darker impulses. I choose awareness over illusion. What I recognize, I can control. What I deny controls me. Dark traits did not appear by accident. They were not mistakes in human design. Aggression, envy, dominance, selfishness, competitiveness. These traits evolved because they worked. Long before morality, philosophy, or social rules existed, survival required force, awareness of hierarchy, protection of resources, and the ability to defend territory. Darkness was not corruption. It was intelligence. And pretending otherwise does not make you enlightened. It makes you unprepared. Modern society treats dark traits as flaws because civilization depends on cooperation. But evolution does not erase instincts simply because they become inconvenient. It buries them, and buried instincts do not disappear. They wait. This is why people who claim to be above aggression still feel rage under pressure. Why those who deny envy still compare obsessively. Why people who reject dominance still crave control in subtle ways. Darkness exists because it once kept us alive, and it still operates beneath the surface of every interaction today. This leads to a critical truth most people resist. Truth 3. Darkness is survival, intelligence. Aggression alerts you to threat. Envy signals hierarchy. Dominance establishes boundaries. Selfishness protects resources. Even cruelty, in its raw form, is the mind's ability to dehumanize danger long enough to eliminate it. These traits are not moral failures. They are tools, and tools are neither good nor evil. They are only dangerous in the hands of those who refuse to acknowledge them. When you understand this, you stop moralizing your instincts and start managing them. You no longer panic when anger arises. You no longer feel ashamed of competitive desire. You no longer confuse impulse with identity. Instead, you observe these forces internally and decide how, when, and if they are expressed. This is the difference between being ruled by darkness and using it intelligently. The people who frighten you most are rarely those who understand their dark side. They are the ones who believe they don't have one. Which brings us to the next truth. Truth 4. Suppressing darkness weakens you. Suppression does not create virtue, it creates fragility. When dark traits are buried instead of integrated, they do not disappear, they become distorted. Aggression turns into passive hostility. Envy becomes resentment. Dominance becomes manipulation. Selfishness becomes entitlement, disguised as morality. The person believes they are controlled, while their behavior tells a very different story. This weakness is detectable. Predators sense repression the way animals sense fear. They notice hesitation where boundaries should exist. They notice guilt where confidence should be present. They notice excessive politeness where firmness should appear. Repression leaks through posture, tone, pacing, and decision-making. And once detected, it becomes exploitable. This is why manipulators target people who identify as purely good. Guilt works on those who deny selfishness. Moral pressure works on those who deny aggression. Emotional blackmail works on those who deny resentment. The shadow does not need to be large to be dangerous. It only needs to be unconscious. Integrated individuals, by contrast, are difficult to exploit. They know their capacity for harm, so they are not shocked by it. They are not destabilized by pressure. They are not confused by provocation. They do not overcorrect to appear virtuous. Their restraint is chosen, not forced, and chosen restraint is far stronger than repression. This is where identity begins to shift. You move from denial to integration, from moral performance to psychological strength, from fear of darkness to command over it. Integration does not mean indulgence. It means ownership. You acknowledge your aggressive potential so it does not surprise you. You recognize envy so it does not rot into bitterness. You understand dominance so you don't unconsciously seek it in unhealthy ways. You do not act on every impulse. You simply stop lying to yourself about having them. This is the foundation of real stability. A person who integrates their dark traits becomes calm, not chaotic, clear, not conflicted, grounded, not reactive. They no longer fear themselves, and because of that, others sense strength, not aggression, strength. This is the difference between those who are controlled by their shadow and those who have mastered it. The difference between repression and control is the difference between fragility and strength. Repression is fear pretending to be morality. Control is awareness guided by choice. When a person represses their dark side, they are constantly fighting themselves, constantly maintaining an image, constantly guarding against impulses they refuse to acknowledge. This creates tension, instability, and emotional leakage. But when a person integrates their dark side, that internal war ends. Nothing is hidden, nothing is denied. And because nothing is denied, nothing erupts uncontrollably. Integration does not mean acting on every dark impulse. It means seeing them clearly without panic or shame. An integrated person understands their capacity for aggression, dominance, envy, or selfishness. And because they understand it, they are not ruled by it. Their restraint is not forced. It is chosen. This is why integration produces calm rather than chaos. The mind is no longer split between who it pretends to be and what it actually feels. This leads to the first visible transformation. Sign 3. Integrated people are calm, not reactive. When pressure rises, integrated individuals do not escalate. They do not panic, lash out, or collapse emotionally. They slow down. They observe. They respond deliberately. Because they are not afraid of their own reactions, they don't need to suppress them. Anger does not frighten them. Fear does not surprise them. Desire does not control them. This internal familiarity creates emotional stability that others immediately sense. Reactivity is always a sign of internal conflict. Calmness is a sign of internal agreement. When a person knows what they are capable of, they do not feel threatened by emotional spikes. They are not shocked by confrontation. They are not destabilized by provocation. And this calmness creates psychological authority. People trust those who remain steady under pressure, because steadiness signals competence and control. This calm is not passivity. It is readiness without urgency. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows they can respond forcefully if needed, but doesn't need to prove it. And that unspoken readiness changes how others behave around them, which leads to the next transformation. Sign 4. Integrated people are hard to manipulate. Manipulation works by exploiting blind spots. Guilt manipulates those who deny selfishness. Fear manipulates those who deny aggression. Moral pressure manipulates those who deny resentment. But integration closes these blind spots. When you know your shadow, external attempts to trigger it lose power. An integrated person does not feel compelled to justify themselves constantly. They do not over-explain to appear good. They do not rush to reassure others. They do not crumble under moral accusation. They can sit with discomfort without reacting. And this frustrates manipulators immediately, because manipulation depends on predictable emotional responses, and integrated individuals are no longer predictable in that way. This is why manipulators avoid people who are self-aware. They sense resistance not through defiance, but through clarity. The integrated person sees the tactic, recognizes the emotional hook, and simply chooses not to engage. No argument, no explosion, no compliance, just non-cooperation. And non-cooperation is the death of manipulation. This psychological stability naturally produces respect, not admiration, not popularity, respect. People feel safer around integrated individuals because there is no hidden volatility, no emotional hypocrisy, no unpredictable eruptions. They know where they stand. They know boundaries exist. They know pressure will not force compliance. Respect emerges because integration creates consistency, and consistency is the foundation of authority. This is the dark psychology of inner balance. balance does not mean neutrality. It means containment. It means being capable of darkness without being consumed by it. Integrated individuals are not harmless. They are contained. And containment is far more powerful than innocence. Innocence is fragile. It collapses under pressure. Integration is stable. It absorbs pressure without breaking. This is why integrated people often appear grounded, intimidating without aggression, calm without detachment. Their presence communicates something primal. This person knows themselves, and self-knowledge is threatening to anyone who relies on illusion, manipulation, or denial. Integration is the turning point. It is where the shadow stops controlling you and becomes something you command. There is a final distinction that separates self-awareness from self-destruction, and most people never learn it. Darkness is not the same as destructiveness. Darkness is capacity, the raw potential for aggression, dominance, selfishness, and harm that exists in every human being. Destructiveness is what happens when that capacity is denied, feared, or allowed to act unconsciously. Mastery is not about erasing darkness. It is about owning it so completely that it no longer owns you. When people fear their dark side, they split themselves in two. One half performs morality, restraint, and kindness. The other half waits in the background, accumulating resentment, frustration, and suppressed desire. Over time, the pressure builds, and eventually it releases, often explosively, often hypocritically, often in moments that feel out of character. This is not failure. It is the predictable result of denial. Mastery begins when that split ends. Owning your darkness does not make you cruel. It makes you conscious. You stop being surprised by your impulses. You stop being ashamed of your instincts. You stop pretending that certain thoughts make you bad. Instead, you observe them, name them, and place them under voluntary restraint. This is where morality becomes real, not performative, not fragile, real. This is why self-knowledge creates moral strength. A person who knows what they are capable of does not need constant rules to behave ethically. They don't rely on fear of punishment or social approval to stay in control. Their restraint comes from clarity, not pressure. They understand the cost of acting on impulse, and they choose not to. Not because they can't, but because they won't. Let's bring the truths together. Everyone has destructive impulses. That is not a flaw. It is human. Morality is not innocence, but self-control. Darkness exists because it once protected survival, not because it was meant to disappear. Suppressing darkness weakens you by creating blind spots that others can exploit. Integration strengthens you by removing those blind spots and replacing them with awareness. When these truths are fully absorbed, something changes in how you move through the world. You stop reacting emotionally to provocation. You stop needing to prove your goodness. You stop being manipulated by guilt, fear, or moral pressure. You stop collapsing under judgment. Instead, you walk with quiet awareness. You see motives more clearly. You recognize patterns faster. You respond rather than react. This is what it means to walk with awareness, restraint, and clarity. Awareness means you notice what arises inside you without panic. Restraint means you choose your actions deliberately. Clarity means you see people as they are, not as you wish them to be. Together, these qualities create psychological stability, and stability is power. People sense this stability immediately. They feel it in your calmness, in your lack of urgency, in your refusal to over-explain, in your ability to sit with discomfort without breaking. This is why integrated individuals often command respect. without demanding it. Not because they dominate, but because they are grounded. Not because they intimidate, but because they are internally aligned. And alignment is rare. Most people are at war with themselves. They deny their impulses while being driven by them. They preach virtue while acting out resentment. They perform kindness while harboring hostility. Integrated individuals don't need to perform. They have nothing to hide. And nothing to hide is deeply unsettling to those who rely on illusion. This is why integrated people are difficult to manipulate. Manipulation requires emotional blind spots. Integration closes them. When you know your capacity for selfishness, guilt loses its grip. When you know your capacity for aggression, fear tactics fail. When you know your capacity for dominance, power games become transparent. You are no longer pushed or pulled by forces you refuse to see. This is mastery. Not perfection, not purity, mastery. The world does not need more people pretending to be good. It needs more people who understand themselves deeply enough to choose restraint consciously. The difference matters. One creates fragility. The other creates strength. This is the end of this protocol, but not the end of the path. Once you see human nature clearly, you cannot unsee it. And once you integrate your own darkness, the world becomes quieter, slower, and far more predictable.